has founded. He is the chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation and co-founder of Blockchain Capital. Let's give Brock Pierce a warm welcome.
I like it very much. I think it's very representative of how you need to view the world to be extremely competent in it. So just want to leave this in here because we are in the United States, and this is in no way an EOS sort of promotion, but now I want to take you back in time. This is 1994, the Today Show, talking about what is the internet. I mean, I think all of you know what the internet is at this point, but there was a point when you did not. And by 1995, Newsweek was writing that the internet was going to fail, and it was a fad, you know, lots of criminals. By the year 2000, when the internet bubble had burst, there was essentially no venture capitalist in the world that would invest in early stage tech. The world had been completely convinced that this was something that maybe was an academic product and it had some utility there, but there would never be any business. eBay and many of the top companies that had gone public back in that day that were profitable, in the case of eBay, profitable, were trading below cash on their balance sheets. You know, how quickly we forget. And I think that's relevant because the blockchain is a new technology that most people don't understand very well. So what have you heard about Bitcoin in this case? Oh, is it secure? I hear about hackings and all this sort of stuff. It's the most secure system the world has ever seen. Hundreds of times more infrastructure in terms of its encryption than Google has in all of its global infrastructure. But when something happens there, it's not at the protocol level. That would be like saying that because someone's email account got hacked, that email as a protocol doesn't work. You know, these are things happening at the application level. It's incredibly secure. Lots of times, early adopters of new systems are the fringe users. Where do you think, you know, Betamax and VHS and all these things, these stories ended? Obviously, as industries mature, more and more of that mainstream adoption occurs, and it looks a lot less like it did before. Prices going up and down. If you've followed the sector over the years that it's been going, it's consistently up and to the right, and of course you're going to be seeing ups and downs because the price is the primary barometer of sentiment. It's not always directly tracking, you know, to the fundamental growth, but all the fundamental usage and the building of the bridges, the roads and the tunnels, the infrastructure, that's been consistent and all the way up to the right. So what is it? I mean, how many of you confidently think you know what Bitcoin is? Well, it's digital value. It's not a government-issued currency, it's a token. It's got fixed supply, and it's programmable. You can write rules into it, like a contract on top of it, so that it can perform functions automatically. It's part of a decentralized system, which we'll get into in a little bit, and it's an incorruptible public ledger. You can't counterfeit a Bitcoin, and so it's a public source of truth. So for the first time in human history, you can transmit value to someone else in the world with complete transparency, with no middleman. It's instant or near instant with negligible fees. That's changed now because of scalability, but you know, this is the general idea of blockchain. So what are the macro sort of trends that are driving this? The most important of which is this concept that can be better read in a book called The Starfish and the Spider. And it's that the world is moving from centralized systems to distributed and decentralized systems. Do you know what happens when you cut the leg off a spider? It walks with a limp. But if you do the same thing to a starfish, it'll grow back. If you cut off that leg with part of the center there, it'll turn into a new starfish. If you cut it 5 ways through the center, it'll become 5 starfish. And this is one of those great books that's talking about decentralization, but not just in a technological sense, but even in this case in nature. But this isn't the only major driver that's affecting this. One of the other big ones is open source software. The world is moving away from this idea of building proprietary software to making open source software, and this isn't a new trend. It's been around for a long time. It's just been going very slowly, even though most of us know that this is a superior model. So why is it going so slowly? Are we wrong? The problem with the open source movement historically is that it's been entirely voluntary, meaning to work on open source projects, you have to donate your time. You don't get paid, so you might do that for because it's cool. You might have a philanthropic reason. You want something, you want to, whatever your motivation is. But when there's a problem, who fixes it? What the blockchain has enabled, the tokenization of the open source movement has enabled, is the ability to add an incentive to the open source, sort of development. Imagine if you could have bought shares in the internet itself. So what these tokens are doing is adding an incentive model to the development of these open source protocols. So that, like, if you could own a piece of TCP and IP and HTTP, etc. And so what happens now is, if you're an engineer, you can make more money working on open source systems than you would working at Google or Facebook. This is when it starts to change, and it changes quickly. That's a major, major trend that's happening. The other is this idea of hardware to shared things. It's happening with assets as well, where you're not just trying to have them for yourself. Like with Uber, you're going to share that vehicle. And so these trends are all kind of coming together, along with a number of others. But those are the three principal ones right now. And so Uber, the largest taxi company in the world, but has no cars. Facebook, the largest media company in the world, but creates no content. Alibaba, etc. Bitcoin is the fastest growing bank in the world with no employees or branches. It's worth noting, some of the other things that change as you have this technology, blockchain in particular. So the world currently runs on this idea of having a centralized system, and all these brands are examples of that, or companies are examples of that. And it's got three general constituents. It's got a customer, an employee, and a shareholder. The problem is there's a misalignment of interests amongst them. The customer just wants the best product and service, hopefully at a good price. They'd probably take it for free if they could. The employee wants to, do something they feel good about, be sufficiently remunerated to live a happy and quality life. Sometimes they take it all too, and the shareholder always just wants as much profit. And understandably so. That's how the system has been designed. That's the design of the game. But when you do this using open source systems, you start to build what are called DACs, or decentralized autonomous communities. And something magical happens when you add transparency, audibility, trustworthiness, inclusiveness, and you do it in an open source architecture with a tokenization model. What happens is the customer, the employee, and the shareholder become one, in a way. What happens is, imagine if you could only buy Apple products with Apple stock. And if Apple's stock, then now you're, as a customer, you're also starting to look a little bit like a shareholder, because you might not always be buying it down to the penny. And so all of a sudden, you're getting interested in this, product that you're a fan of. You might start buying more of it, and you're realizing that anything that community or tribe is doing that's causing appreciation within that community is causing it to go up in value. And so you start to really feel like you've got ownership in this thing. And you probably start to tell your friends about it. You might start adding your skills and start supporting that, whether it be as a developer, a designer. You might start giving that gift to that community, because what happens is you create an alignment of interest, and anyone that's done business understands the problems always lie when where the conflicts are. And if you can align the incentives of all the parties, something magical happens. And so this is the stuff that's driving this trend right now. So where is it happening? Is there adoption? There's 3 billion people on the planet that don't have access to financial services. Another 2 billion people with limited access to financial services. And so you're seeing this stuff happening in the developing world all over where the need is greatest. Does anyone know the biggest and most advanced payment market in the world? It's Kenya. And it's not using the shilling. They're using prepaid cell phone minutes, because this is where the need is the greatest. And so much in the same way that Africa leapfrogged wired telecommunications to go straight to wireless, it's in these places where you don't have the incumbent infrastructure. And it's a beautiful thing too, to democratize the global financial system in a way where every human being on the planet will have equal access, and the least fortunate billions are going to be the biggest beneficiaries. We benefit too, but it's a beautiful thing to see. So that's what's happening on the consumer side, and for the obvious reasons. That's where the need's greatest. But this is the thing that's probably more interesting in this room. This is going back to 2014 and through 2015. And these are some of the big, call it the smartest financial companies in the world, with big operations in California and New York. And they've all been jumping into this and making this a bigger and bigger part of the business over the last couple of years. And it hasn't slowed down. It's more or less every major financial institution has made this a critical part of their business, and this is in all the top cities in the world: London, Hong Kong, Singapore. You're seeing this in the hubs where the human capital is greatest and where the resources are greatest, because they know the future before we often do, because they've got more resources and access to information. But this is what's happening in the big cities around the world, and they're all aggressively, trying to compete for that business right now. And so this is the year 2018, where we leave the pilot phase. We've been building kind of all the bridges, the roads, the tunnels, connecting all the dots, getting all the pieces in place. And this is the year where scalability hits. This is when the big ideas become possible. And this is happening everywhere in the world. These are just the unicorns. I don't know if Puerto Rico has any, tech unicorns, but this is a global phenomenon. Technology is, changing the world everywhere. This is just a chart of the blockchain portion of it. It's all over the world. And the reason these slides are so relevant is historically, if you had a great idea and you were not on the west coast of the United States, the probability of your idea ever coming to fruition was very low. You were at a massive disadvantage, and it's not because the west coast of the United States had all the smart people with the great ideas. It's that the capital was there. And so what's happening right now is venture capital is being disrupted in a way where capital is becoming accessible in ways it's never been before. Meaning if the next Mark Zuckerberg was to come out of Puerto Rico, that would be possible now. If the next Einstein can come out of Africa, all of these things are becoming possible now. And so it's a very exciting time, for innovation. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the numbers around venture capital. So in 2014, this industry took in capital that was comparable with the internet in 1995. In 2015, comparable with the internet in 96. Back then it cost you $5 million to build a website to sell shoes online. Now you can do things for tens of thousands of dollars, and accessing resources is changing. But what happened there in 2016 is, the VCs said, where are the exits? Where is the revenue? And they're like, we already have a little exposure. We're not sure we get it. And so it went flat. And this is where the ICO emerged. The ICOs last year at the end exceeded seed stage venture capital by 4x. Meaning the blockchain mechanism that I just described to you is now 4 times bigger than earlier seed stage venture capital. This isn't like something I'm talking about 10 years from now. It happened last year. And this is just the beginning of that. You're seeing VC-backed deals. I mean, the VCs can't get the deals. And that's the other problem with venture capital right now, is that the business model, and I've been a VC for a long time, is so dependent upon unicorns. The problem is the really good unicorns are going to go down this model. So it's something to be mindful of. I thought you might appreciate this just on kind of the sector 2017 ROI. Digital assets are interesting. If you're not following this, this should at least give you a reason to maybe learn a little more. I'm certainly not encouraging you to do anything, but learn. And so this is a graph of the ICOs over the last few years. And so I was one of the 5 founding board members of Mastercoin. That's before the chart begins. June of 2013 was the first ICO when the model was invented by J.R.R. Willett, another friend here in the room that was CTO of that project, and many of us in this industry. But for a long time, this model didn't take off because it wasn't understood how it works, and is it good? And you had lots of venture capital, and so the really talented entrepreneurs kept taking the VC money, until eventually Ethereum came along that could have raised money from any firm in the world. They were in such demand. And they said, no, we're going to do this ICO model. We're going to do this token model because it helps build community, and it's necessary for our vision. We couldn't do it as a traditional corporation. And so that started happening, and then people got excited about some of its utility when it went online, and this big transaction happened where over $150 million went in. This is when the really talented entrepreneurs said, are you kidding me? This model can scale? An idea can do something this large, more than any VC would ever give me? What am I doing? I need to get into on this. I need to start figuring out how this model works. There must be something big and fascinating happening here, something that might transform the world. And the bridges, the roads, and the tunnels are about built and connected. I stepped down from my firm last year after this, where we did the first token offering of a digital security using the Jobs Act, specifically Regulation S&D. We used a Singaporean vehicle as the issuer, and we raised what was a small target at the time because that was before those bubbles started getting big. Brought in $10 million from, I think it's saying here in 35 minutes, it was quite a bit less, from 80 countries and 700 plus investors, completely democratized. So it wasn't available just to pensions, endowments, and high net worth. It was available to everybody. We had obviously some accredited investor things and a lot of rules around the United States, but in general, it was a largely democratized transaction, a precedent-setting transaction, the first sort of digital equity like this. And it's also liquid. You know, most venture funds have a 10-year lockup with 2-year extensions. Liquidity every time. Are we in a bubble? This is, you know, kind of the dot-com sort of period, but I think this illustrates it pretty well. So during the dot-com period in '99 at our heights, we got up to 6.7 trillion. And that was when it was a Western phenomenon, and that's not adjusted for inflation. And this technology is probably 10 times more important and going to be impactful than the internet itself. So are we in a bubble? You tell me. I can't connect the dots looking forward. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever works for you. I like talking about this because my definition of a billionaire is different than most. I like changing sort of words sometimes, and for me, a billionaire is someone that's positively impacting the lives of a billion people. A unicorn is a community positively impacting the lives of a billion people. I believe in giving is kind of the greatest gift there is, and the more you give, kind of the more you get. We'll see how that goes over time for me, but I'll always have couches to sleep on, so I'm not worried. I think this is one of the keys to success, certainly to happiness, and that is evaluating your life and figuring out what you're good at, what you're really good at, what I like to call your superpowers, which are just skills that you've uniquely refined over the course of your lives. Like Malcolm Gladwell would talk about, you've done 10,000 hours. I mean, that is now a really well-refined skill. You know, therefore, I like to call it a superpower. So what are you good at? What do you love? What are you passionate about? That's another one. And what does the world need right now? If you find yourself in the middle of those three, you don't even have to worry about the one on the bottom, because therein lies your life purpose. When you find that intersection, you normally encounter a thing called flow and others, and this is another principle I live my life by. That last one is called Ikigai. This is called Kaizen, and that is to approach every situation and everything you do and do it as well as you possibly can, and then better tomorrow. We're here in Puerto Rico, so I want to spend a few minutes just talking about, you know, kind of what I see here. I used to come to Puerto Rico when I was a teenager. I think it was because of the 18-year-old drinking or something, but I came back again in late 2013, early 2014 to set up an IFE, and I've been kind of familiar with a lot of the things going on down here. And I'd been telling a number of my friends, you know, about what was going down here. And Michael Turpin spoke earlier today. We've been friends for a very long time. He's patient zero from the blockchain community. You know, he is patient zero, the first one to literally pack up his things and move. And that's a huge commitment. I mean, that's someone really voting with their feet, you know, literally. And so it's a wonderful thing to see. And I've been telling a number of friends that this is, you know, I think we're going to want to go and end up and do some things. And the hurricane basically accelerated the timetable by a year. But, you know, you go where you need to go, when you need to go. And so there's lots of things that we can do in Puerto Rico. Clearly, there's going to be lots of power needs. There's lots of, you know, 30% of the island is still without it. Last night, old San Juan went out. That was due to a fire. But there's lots of things that need to be done from that perspective. Food is still a problem. You know, a lot of agriculture. Most of the food product or agriculture here on the island is imported. I think only 30% of it's local. I think that that's obviously another area where there's an opportunity to improve, but let's make sure, you know, the people that need food now are getting food now, and, you know, try to build out those agricultural businesses. I want to meet every entrepreneur in Puerto Rico that, you know, is trying to solve these problems, because I want to figure out how to help them. We are here to help Puerto Rico, the people, and the earth. And we want to help Puerto Ricans I'm not here to try and own businesses. I'm here to help Puerto Ricans own businesses, and together, as one, we can do great things, and everybody can win together. And it's this concept, if you may have seen at the beginning of this, it said me, and that W was basically turned upside down to produce we. And I think that's the type of world, that's possible. I think that we can change the game. So what, if any of this has inspired you in any way or piqued your curiosity, what to do next, that call to action can be important, and it's pretty simple. Go buy, $10 or $100 or something small worth of Bitcoin or something. Go convert some of that into something like Ethereum. Go buy something. That's just kind of like figure out the most basic things. Like I could talk to you about email until I'm blue in the face. Send your first message. You learn a lot really fast, doing things versus just trying to study them. And if you want to go a step further than that, do the same thing and take a look at those top 10 coins and put $10 or $100 into 5 of them. That's going to teach you how to be discerning. And the main thing that you're looking for to differentiate, I think, the things that are going to be most successful and not is, it's really a lot about community building, because that's what these systems ultimately are, is they're big communities. The technology and the focus and all those things obviously matter as well, and you have to evaluate all those things. But the technology only provides a first mover advantage, and it has to achieve a network effect due to a community for that to persist. So, and you can continue that exercise down the list. I mean, if you got through the top 100, you know almost as much information as I do, and that's not that much work, and always show someone else. It's a great way to learn. If you have any other questions for me, I try to be as accessible as I can to everyone. I hope to meet every single person here that is trying to make a difference in Puerto Rico. And if you are, we'll make as much time as I can to help you. One of the ways to get in touch with me, obviously, is, it's Twitter at Brock Pierce, but you can also ask me anything at brock.ai, which is the artificial intelligence sort of version of me. Not that intelligent yet, but it's there to try and recycle answers and things of that nature to efficiently make everything you need to know available for you. I've been a faculty at the Singularity University for a number of years teaching this stuff, so we're not, most importantly, I think I'd like to close that I don't view myself as a crypto person, and the people that are here with me and coming here are not crypto people. Some of them are. The vast majority of them are people from every modality of life, bringing every skill that we think Puerto Rico needs. This is not a crypto thing. Blockchain is the thing that's going to bring a bunch of capital, a bunch of startups, and with that a bunch of jobs. That part is already done. You've got 20 plus companies that are friends of ours that have moved here very recently, 50 to 100 people on the way to being 500 quickly. And these are well-funded startups, some of them with tens of millions of dollars. And they're going to need to be in places where the jobs are most needed. And that's one of those really good first steps in rebuilding. And what has been this brain drain on Puerto Rico, where 3.5 million people have gone to 2.8, and where people are graduating and leaving, circumstances are tough and people are leaving. Let's end the brain drain and turn it around with the brain gain. Thank you very much.